Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for signing in today. My name is Chris, and I'm going to be running you through a little bit more information about DataAU. This session today is going to cover a little bit more of an understanding into your carbon journey, how your region can measure your carbon emissions profile using data visualization tools, and a little bit more of the product offering that DataAU has within the platform as well. Um, Essentially, DataAU is secure, online, and up-to-date economic and socio-demographic data available at your fingertips. There's a range of different tools that leverage the unique insights that we have within the platform. But what I want to do today is focus a little bit more on the carbon emissions modelling that we've prepared for yourselves. At a high line, DataAU has a series of tools that either allow you to leverage and compare your region's metrics for new funding programs or grants opportunities, analysis and comparison of your visitor activity and ways to support your unique tourism economy, discover insights into your region's supply chain activity, efficiently compare and contrast your region across hundreds of nationally consistent and insightful metrics as well. The ability to curate and share your region's activity and opportunities with public profiling and automated reporting and communications tools as well. Obviously, the one that we're going to be talking about today, the ability to track past and projected greenhouse gas emissions by carbon category within each region, the first model of its kind to do so in Australia. At a glance, it is a market-leading data visualization platform that is built to serve a range of organisations and workflows, and is backed by the team at AEC Group with over 3 decades of economic consulting and data management, analysis and interpretation as well. The core competencies within AEC Group, there's a group that focus on economics, finance and financial sustainability, market research, and the space that I sit within, which is the data visualization and access. And our competencies transcend regional development and opportunity identification, infrastructure appraisal and business case work and complex consulting work as well, industry development planning, local government financial sustainability and policy advisory too. So I've put together a couple of tips, or I suppose essentials for your carbon journey. But I suppose in saying that, there are, and looking at these points here, there are a few limitations. Obviously, the advice that we sort of covered today is quite general in nature, and there's certainly not a one-size-fits-all for exploring your carbon journey and abilities to reduce your carbon footprint within a region. So it would depend on your region's current position, the proponent, the group that you represent, and the appetite for affecting the carbon journey as well. Anecdotally, AEC Group has a team of professionals that have built detailed proposals for progressing carbon journeys across many regions of Australia. So these are taken, or I suppose distilled, just some of the suggestions from applied research and planning support from a range of clients as well. So the first point that I've sort of put up there is the ability to build a detailed picture of your region's carbon activity. Obviously, using information and an evidence-based approach is at the core of opening the door to discussion and depoliticising a very controversial topic as well, or arguably a controversial topic. Obviously, the abilities to build a picture of your carbon activity is a tool that's provided through DataAU, through DataAU's carbon model. But also using resources such as the National Greenhouse Gas Accounts to run an inventory that is comparable to other regions, data that is transparent, as I mentioned, evidence-based, non-partisan, using reputable sources are essentially the hallmarks to building that detailed picture that is comparable and gives you the ability to contrast as well. The other point I've got up there is the to develop a climate change action plan as well. So something that outlines specific strategies and targets for reducing emissions is important. The implementation of energy efficiency measures as well in buildings or infrastructure, such as retrofitting buildings or installing solar panels or renewable energy generation. Obviously, there's a lot of talk around that, but that could be something to progress the conversation. Point number 4 there, considering infrastructure investment or promoting sustainable mobility that reduces carbon per capita, such as encouraging the use of public transport or walking and cycling. Raising attention to the use of renewable energy sources such as solar and wind power, and work with local utilities and business to increase the use of that clean energy as well. The ability to work and engage with local communities and businesses to educate both them and yourselves, and collaborate further around climate change or around activities that you take to reduce your climate footprint, and then encouragement for taking actions to reduce individual emissions, taking individual responsibility through the information that you gather as well. The ability to encourage sustainable land use practices, so suggestions such as protecting natural habitats, promoting green space, and supporting urban agriculture as well. Adopting sustainable procurement policies, so stuff that promotes the use of environmentally friendly products and services. Collaborating with neighbouring local governments and state government agencies in an effort to pool resources and coordinate efforts to reduce emissions. And lastly, they're continuously monitoring and reporting on progress. Tracking your progress, I think, is particularly important. Again, going back to that first point of using comparable data that allows you to track your progress is key in reducing or progressing through your carbon journey. For the purposes of today, we're going to focus on the ability to report and to track using DataAU's carbon production and projection model. Now, I think as I mentioned, there is a group that have built a pretty reliable data source that you can use to compare a local government area with other local government areas across the nation. And it uses the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Waste as a trusted source for the national greenhouse gas accounts. So I guess that's what we use. How it works, the carbon model is an Australian first with specificity and measurement by local government area. The LGA emissions are estimated based on the proportional share of each LGA, makes the makeup of a subsector based on a variety of methods, including contributing carbon categories. So breaking it down by direct emissions, including energy subcategories, industrial processes, land use change and forestry, transport, and also waste. They're all disaggregated using LGA shares of the state, such as employment by industry, animal population, rice production population, land use type. There's a lot of information that's important that goes into it. But why is that important and why do I bring it up? It really distills and breaks it down through the reporting that you're able to procure from DataAU. You're able to see a pretty clear report card on how your region is performing, your net positive, your net negative emissions, if there's any carbon sequestration activities that are occurring in your region. And obviously that evidence-based approach does help to support, directly support a carbon strategy. Just before I jump into a live walkthrough of the platform, there are a couple of other features that sit within DataAU. Actually, there's quite a lot of other features. I'm probably understating that. That would help to derive unique insight to your region and to activities within your region as well. There's plenty of users that do benefit from that as well. But what I've done over the next couple of slides is break down some of the core areas that you might have seen before with using some sort of data visualization. I think some of the components that are paramount to a data visualization tool sit within these core features. And then there's some additional features, some unique modules that we've built in that do help to derive that unique insight and stand DataAU apart from most of the other tools that are out there. But essentially, the core features, it is a suite of useful data topics and insight-driven tools. Obviously, the data is the backbone. Agency data, model data, proprietary data is all read in and use essentially the backbone of a platform that allows you extensive and consistent national data at the regional and local government levels. There is models, so the providing economic impact and event impact modelling, obviously using some of our methodologies designed by our consulting teams. The reporting, the ability to produce or procure automated and customisable reports depending on your needs and your output. Reports that can aggregate multiple local government areas or simply provide a comprehensive individual local area statistics for one particular region as well. The ability to thematically map variables within data topics. across geographic areas of interest across Australia. Obviously, the training and the support, running sessions such as this to educate users on and yourselves on what is available and how to use it is stuff that we do quite regularly. And then within your organisation, the ability to stand up multiple users that might not necessarily be analysts or familiar with economic data and its use, but the ability to use it and better their workflows or give them more information that they might benefit from as well. Now, dipping into some of the exclusive modules, we have the profile builder that I did mention briefly. It's essentially and there's a still of it just on the left there. It's essentially a region's curated snapshot that highlights your community, economic features, and dynamically updates to tell a unique story. The grant assistant as well. It is pulling on the same data that sits within our taxonomy as you explore data insights. But the goal here is to re-represent the data by areas of interest. So it's a little bit more intuitive to navigate. If you're looking for a specific type of data within an area of interest, say you're applying for a particular funding program, or you just want to learn some of those unique or anomalies within your region, it's easier to see that when it's broken down by housing suitability or affordability and supply in a region, or green infrastructure, or health and resilience of a community. And this extends to the AEC megatrends as well, also aiming to break down unique data topics by areas of interest to highlight those trajectories of change as well. There's projections. We have projections for estimated resident population, for gross regional product, employment and labour force trends out to 2041. And you can run those across custom catchments, and I'll show you what that looks like through a walkthrough. The carbon modelling, as I've mentioned a little bit earlier, the ability to show historic levels of carbon emissions within your region and an outline of those carbon contributing categories, as well as those future emissions baseline scenarios. And lastly, for now, the tool of the tourism portal being the ability to view your tourism activity and your visitor economy through a dynamic dashboard, and then further information and insights into those trends as well. What people are doing, visitors by type, by purpose, and then where they're coming from, their source market as well. So plenty of insights into who's visiting your region and why that's the case. So as I mentioned before, the data is particularly important, and primary agency model data are some of the data types that we house within DataAU. Obviously, supporting your carbon journey is particularly important, but and this is a still of a carbon emissions profile that we've prepared. Obviously, there is a need for detailed emissions data within certain levels of government and reporting. But this particular report shows carbon equivalent emissions by local government area relative to the state and to the nation. What I might do is take the opportunity to jump over to a website to show you a little bit more about what it looks like through a live demonstration. So dataau.com.au will take you to this page here. You can navigate more information about the platform and what it actually means following today's session just by going to the Resource Centre, which is up on the top there. Resource Centre contains information such as news, all of our monthly data updates, previous webinars that have been run of specific modular content that we have, information that we gather as well, such as our Economic Development Practitioner Survey, and further information about the platform as well. You can find videos in our knowledge base, frequently asked questions, some additional data releases, and then some context to individual data topics. Obviously, there's a lot of data that sits within DataAU, but context to some of these topics sit within the data articles that our team prepare as well. But logging in, I've already logged in for this session, but as you click through, you'll view the dashboard. What I want to do for those who have tuned in specifically to learn more about the carbon model is just take you straight through and show you what that looks like. And then following that, I'd like to run a little bit more of a quick overview of the platform itself. But as I click through, I'll visit the carbon model. It's just this tab here. As I mentioned, it provides you those 10 years of historic emissions data, and then uses the last 5 years to provide a future baseline scenario or these projection lines that you can see. It's a dynamic scorecard, if you will, where you can hover over the top and view a little bit more information about each category or the historic trend line, what that actual total represents. And there's interpretive text that actually explains a little bit more about what you're looking at as well. So as you can see, there's 10 bars there, all color-coded based on the contributing carbon categories. So you've got the likes of energy in that light blue. Obviously, it's a large proportional category contributing to carbon profiles within each region of Australia. You've got land use change and forestry. So it's below the zero, which indicates that this particular region that I've logged in as my account is reporting negative land use change, forestry, some sort of sequestration activity that they might be engaged in, or the way that they account for their green or their environment. You've got industrial processes sitting above that, and then agriculture and waste sitting above the top, up the top as well. So looking at how each category contributes to that trend, this kilotons of carbon equivalent activity, using those last 5 years will inform the projection lines out here as well. There's a little bit of interactivity in the local contribution section, which is the second part to the to this sort of scorecard, where you can find a series of graphs to show how the region. So I have logged in as Cessnock for the purpose of today's demonstration, and I can see how Cessnock compares to the region, which is Hunter. And then how Hunter compares to the state, New South Wales, and then how New South Wales proportionately compares to the nation as well. Now you can do this across the activity that has occurred. So across the last 10 years, you can see how proportionately Cessnock has contributed to carbon activity within its region, and then so on and so forth. You can also see that through net negative emissions. As you noted from the graph, this is a good example, as you can see, negative carbon categories, net negative emissions, or carbon sequestration activities. So you can see these sequestration activities influencing Cessnock against Hunter, Hunter against New South Wales, and New South Wales against the nation as well. An annual comparison is further down, but obviously taking it any further than this, there's a lot of different ways in which you can interpret that, just based on those very generic suggestions for following a carbon journey. This is but the start of a much more complicated journey for a lot of groups. But obviously it has a lot of information there. Now, what you can do with this particular region is download that document, and everything that that you see here is reproduced into a report that you're able to use and track periodically as well. Now, in the future, we'll look at carbon consumption as well, which is the other side of the coin. But for the purpose of this report, you're looking at a carbon production and projections model. More information on how it's calculated and what's involved sits in the information. Now, there are some users that also subscribe to multiple local government areas. So if your account uses multiple regions, you're able to access a report for the LGAs that you have access to as well. But as you can see, you can explore a little bit more information about the calculations and the LGA shares or methodology rather for the carbon model there as well. So that's a little bit of a breakdown of the carbon model and the data that you're able to access within that. As I mentioned, there's much more to go into with DataAU, and what I want to do is just cover a couple of the essentials within the platform for those that have a little bit more time. Explore Data Insights is arguably the most important tab or tile to familiarize yourselves with. It lends itself to all of the other tabs in terms of the data that each module will pull from. So understanding how to access a very specific data topic within a custom region and compare that to other regions is probably one of the more important tasks that you can run within DataAU. So if you click on that tab there, what you want to do is jump into the map screen, and in that map screen, it will render a picture of Australia that you can zoom in and out. That's interactive, and you can click on specific geographies, one or several, and create what we call a custom catchment. So if I'm looking to define a first area, I would first want to choose in the lower right what sort of geography I'm looking for based on the data I seek. Now, it is as granular as statistical area 1, which is quite specific. So if I zoom into to the likes of New South Wales, inner city Sydney, you can see it does get quite specific. There are less data topics that are maintained at that detailed level. The most or the largest proportion of data topics that you have available to any one account would sit within the local government area. What I'll do for the purpose of this demonstration is just show 3 custom catchments within local government areas to show you how that compares. So what I can do is I can just click on the map and I can add multiple local government areas to create that custom catchment. So I'm just going to call that one SID Area 1. I can click add another area to add a second custom catchment, and what you'll see is it will deselect those areas because we're creating a new area. If I travel up, I might select Brisbane for another custom catchment. So this one will be area 2, and we'll call it Brisbane Surrounds. Okay, and then you can create up to 3 custom catchments. So for the third one, we'll leave Melbourne out, we'll add Melbourne in as well. And we can just add in a few areas there. Any number of geographies for custom catchments. Bear in mind, it is best to keep your custom catchments to the same geography, comparing apples with apples across the same, or data topics across the same geographies rather. Now, the following or the preceding 4 tabs are the taxonomy in which the hundreds of data topics that we regularly maintain sit. So as you click through, you can see a little bit more information, and what we're going to be doing is navigating those 3 custom areas that we created. So so what I've done is I've clicked on economy here. We can look at this indicator, which is economic growth. I can see the data topic being the AEC indicator. I can see the reference for that as well. It's AEC Group's gross regional product model. And I can see here a percentage economic growth based on the 3 custom catchments that I created in the previous map screen. For indexes, you are likely able to compare against the national figure as well. So that 4th option for Australia also pops up. Depending on the data topic that you're looking at, there is a predefined display or output options following that. So you've got your bar or your column tables or your raw data table. The ability to export that to a data cart, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second, or directly export an image if to put it straight into a report if that's what you're interested in. Again, more data sits across those next tabs. The data card is particularly important because it allows, firstly, the ability to navigate topics across the entire taxonomy. So if I'm looking for data on population, for example, as I type in population up the top, I can see that sits across not only people, but also livability, economy. And we've extrapolated the 2021 census as a large data release that affects a lot of the data, both modelled and agency data that we have within the platform. But yeah, what I can see there is population data sitting across the taxonomy, so I can search for it a lot easier from this screen. And then I can also see the specific data topics that are available at certain geographies as well, just using those blue ticks. So it's a good way to navigate the data and what's available to you. And then if I'm unable to click on data topics after selecting the map screen, I might actually discover that it's because I was looking for tourism or travel data, and there's no population data within a travel zone, for example. My output options from the data cart, if I click download as Excel, I can click any number of data topics there. And what it will do, given I've created 3 custom areas or custom catchments in the map screen, what it will do is it'll produce 3 Excel files named according to the custom catchments that I created on the map screen. And in there, all the data topics with worksheets and cross tabs and all the information that I might need based on what I've selected from the previous screen. So bit of a crash course. What I've done is I've recorded this session so you're able to go back and visit it at a later stage as well if you wanted to review that content one more time. One of the modelling or some of the input-output modelling is another area of interest that I think is worth visiting as well, because once you've familiarised yourself with accessing specific data topics, the ability to leverage AEC's models using your DataAU subscription is particularly important as well. The modelling, you can run 3 different types. So you've got an economic impact modelling. So you can run economic shocks across 19 or the 114 sectors, ANZIC sectors across a region. So if you've got a proponent for jobs or for economic investment into a region for an infrastructure project, that might be a good model to run. If you're working within events, or you're looking at the proposal of an event of a varying scale within a region, the next 2 tabs might be useful as well. They've been designed differently. The reporting that is produced, it looks the same, but the ability to input information is a bit more intuitive. And again, you can stand up different members within your organization to benefit from something like this, where it's a bit more intuitive to identify the scale of the event, what the spend mix might look like, who the attendees are, where they're coming from, and then therefore the economic impact to the region. If I take you through the input-output modelling, I'll just use one of the previous models that I've placed into this model before. So previously I just proposed a road construction. In this description, I can add in full-time equivalent jobs or capital expenditure as well. This is just a bit of a catch-all, just some personal notes that I can take that might benefit me at a later stage. But yeah, this is just an area just to capture some information. All of this, the model details you might have seen on the previous screen, all the previous models that you've run sit there, so you have access to them. So individual users can access their individual modeling that they've run. If there is an early stage conversation about a large scale infrastructure project, it obviously sits within your account and yours alone. So you're able to visit that at a later stage. As I click through, it then gives you the model input screen. So this is where you can run an economic shock for a particular local government area to understand what its impacts would look like within the wider community as well. Now, our model is called a temporal IO model as well. So what you can do and what you see here is 2 years. You can add any number of years to run the model that would incorporate both construction and ongoing costs to see the impacts across multiple years within an industry, within an economy, across the industries. So the basic details were a road construction project. So you can already see that there's some data that's been put in here. I can see 8 million into heavy and civil engineering in the very first year. Construction services are 4 million. That totals up into these bold columns of 12. So that's the parent column, and these are the subsectors. As I mentioned, it's 20 sectors, or 19/20 sectors. We've extrapolated ownership of dwellings to give a bit of a realistic idea on the impacts to housing supply and impacts to housing in a particular region. But breaking it down, you can put data in at the 20 sector level, that bold column, or the 114 subsector level, which are these non-bolded columns once you click down the menu. So place in all of your data there. Once you've placed in some information, so I put a little bit more into professional, scientific and technical services, I can run that model. And I might just jump back to that screen. What you can do up the top here, your input units can either be millions of dollars or numbers of jobs. So again, once I've run that model, what it will do is it'll produce this report here. You can see the information from the basic inputs that's captured up the top. There's a little bit of interpretive text that's included as well, with a breakdown of the economic shock, the totals, the sectors, just the parent column sectors, and then broken down by year. And then that total economic shock that I ran, also visible on this side here. I can edit those inputs from this screen as well if I wish. The report itself gives you a total output. So again, you can corroborate that 16 million is also sitting here, the initial stimulus in the local economy. I can also see gross regional product, incomes, and full-time equivalent jobs broken down by type 1, so those direct requirements, your industry support, but also the on-flow effects, which are the type 2 household consumption impacts as well, with a total of economic output, gross regional product, incomes, jobs. There's a couple of graphs that break it down by the 20 sector level as well. And it breaks down based on those economic shock, type 1 and type 2 impacts. So I can see running a road construction project where you generate $12.2 million in economic shock. That purple column is unsurprisingly quite high. But what it also shows is a little bit more of a story about, say, ownership of dwellings, as I mentioned before, what the impact of housing might look like on a particular local government area based on the large-scale road construction project that we're looking into. Also, the impacts on manufacturing. While there is type 1 impacts, there's also a lot of type 2 impacts. Same with accommodation, food services, and healthcare and social assistance. Again, all of these are dynamic, so you can hover over the top and add in these figures if you wish as well. I can see the breakdown by year, so I just ran the model over 2 years, one being the construction year and then the second being ongoing. And then this second breakdown here, the first one up the top here was gross regional product, each individual industry sector broken down by impacts in terms of gross regional product. The second area is broken down in terms of full-time equivalent jobs. So slightly different, but reports looking the same as well. And then a breakdown by year. I can see the sources that are used to prepare the model, and then AEC Group / DataAU's input-output methodology that's applied to make these calculations as well. And my output options sit on the lower right, so I can download that document, the transaction table, I can close that model. And as I mentioned, you can see the models that are previously run once you click on the input-output modeling, either in the side tab there on the left or from the tab on the dashboard as well, just this input-output modeling tab. Just very quickly, I'll jump into the event impact modeling as well. This one where you wanted to do perhaps a food festival or something like that, or maybe a music festival, whatever it might be. Again, if there is a person within the team that might not be familiar with running economic impact assessments, this is quite an intuitive way to engage them and empower them with the tools to understand what the impacts of a large-scale proposed event might have within the community. So again, you can see event type, arts and culture, sporting, convention, exhibition, event scale, the daily attendance, start date, end date. Once I place all that information in, it starts to populate further sections where I can add in attendee spend. So I might spend $100 on the ticket price. I can choose whether they're local or non-local, domestic day trips, overnights or internationals, food and bev, spend mix outside the event. And I can adjust that: food and drink, shopping, entertainment, gambling, transport, with the promoter spend as well. So I can see what the impacts of I suppose logistics, staging, performance fees, staff wages, marketing costs all sort of look like as well. If I were to run that model, I would also need to put in some information about what the attendance is. I can choose a date that we start. Choose a date maybe slightly higher than that. Let's say 10 days. Once I've run that model, it will produce a report that does look similar to the economic impact assessment that we ran before, where you get a breakdown of type 1 and type 2 impacts, that on-flow effect there, your gross regional product, and then your full-time equivalent jobs by industry sector. Your sources that are used to produce the model, and then that input-output methodology as well. If I download the document, just for argument's sake, I'll show you. It just produces a Word document that you're able to use and output depending on your needs. But you'll be able to see here it's relatively it's everything that you see on the screen, so nice and easy to use. The Grant Assistant, again, it's probably something worth just having a brief look at. But this, again, is an intuitive way to look at data and anomalies or outlying data topics of interest within your region by those intuitive areas. So right now, again, my account is logged in as Cessnock in New South Wales. And I can see that from the account that I've logged in as, based on this ranked performance of my LGA, ranked against my state and against the nation, I can see that the access to and quality of housing sits as at below average performance in the 2 to 4th index out of 10. So I might want to investigate that further. If I click on that tab, I can see the metrics of mortgage stress rate, rental stress rate, housing suitability, government housing, and household incomes. And what I might want to do is put that straight into a funding proposal for housing affordability and supply. Now I can click on individual topics, or I can remove mortgage stress rate if I want. I can do that on this screen as well. But if I want to download that information, I'll just click in the lower left there, download Word doc. If I just move that screen out of the way, download Word doc, and it'll produce all the information that you see on screen, in addition to a table of data as well, so that you're able to produce a custom chart if that's what you wish. If you're not happy with the pastel colors that you see on the screen there. So again, that's the information that's produced for once you've downloaded the desired data and the variables within each data topic. So the grants area is quite useful in that it is giving you ranked performance across areas of interest. Mega trends are additional data topics that we've captured, trying to show how a region is trending across some insightful and perhaps novel areas of interest as well. So again, innovation, how many trademarks per 1,000 businesses sit proportionately within your local government area. It might lend some idea to innovation, or how to perhaps to support that as well. And as you get more familiar with a lot of these tools, you see how some of them can actually interact quite well with others. If you're looking at supporting an argument for housing, for example, you might be able to run an economic impact assessment based on that, or projections for that matter. If you have an expected estimate resident population double your current population at 2041, a large-scale infrastructure project that you're able to run an economic impact assessment might be highly valuable. I think familiarizing yourself with the platform comes with a bit of time, but also there's a lot of benefit to using it as well. Now I've just jumped into strategic projections just to show you what that looks like very quickly. Similar in look and feel to exploring data insights, where you identify 3 custom catchments. So you can see I've done one for North Queensland up here, Charters, Towers, Flinders and Richmond as the first catchment. This second one being Central Highlands, and then the third one being Mount Isa. If I click on population, what it will do is it'll produce 3 lines that show me the population outlook out to 2041. Hovering over the right, I can see those 3 custom catchments. For estimated resident population and labour force, because it pulls on state-based population data sets, it gives you a conservative and optimistic outlook as well. So you're able to use that in your strategic projections. But these tabs just produce a graph based on the tab that you're selecting, and yeah, you're able to output those in the lower right there with either an image or as a CSV file. Jumping back in and moving along, a competitive assessment. This is a particularly useful one. There is a lot of information in here as well. I'm going to just give you a very brief rundown. We include a lot of interpretive text in this particular module because there's a lot to get through. But essentially what you look at in the first screen is a cluster map giving you relative interconnectivity across your 19 ANZIC sectors within your local government area. So once again, logged in as Cessnock, and what I can see is representation and growth axes for individual industry sectors. And essentially what I'm looking at and what I'm wanting to distill is sectors that sit within the 3rd quadrant of this cluster map. So underrepresented but high growth potential industry sectors. The size of the circle represents the size of the industry relative to the economy of that local government area. But looking at this at a glance, healthcare and social assistance is a large area in Cessnock, 2,284 full-time equivalent jobs, and it sits in a high growth potential area. This is further to the right, higher the growth potential, further to the bottom, the less represented, using what's called a location quotient. So this one might also be of interest: professional, scientific and technical services. And if I wanted to drill into the 114 sectors, I just need to click on that dot to find out more information about what that is. So this could be an area of interest. The further from this center point in theory, the more interested I might be in a particular sector or subsector. So computer systems design and related services is proportionately underrepresented, but of a high growth potential to the region. So if I click on supply chain, the next tab over to the left, it gives me a bit more information, or rather a lot more information. It's insight surrounding the relative interconnectivity between local businesses. And there's categorized, this is what's called a Sankey map. And if I just click back into all sectors, what I'm looking at now is Cessnock's economy, represented by this grey bar being $4.9 billion. And then these individual upstream and downstream activities categorized that contribute to this $4.9 billion economy. So I can see coming into the economy, we've got local goods and services, we've got imports that are purchased outside the local economy, other inputs to production. Over coming out is local sales to industry, local households and government consumption, fixed capital formation, final uses, and then exports. So coal mining being a large export of Cessnock makes sense. My export options are in the lower right there as well. I can see a supply chain overview, a bit of a re-representation of that Sankey graph to distill either value of input or local value chain, total value chain. We've just added the ability to distill import replacement opportunities. So here's a huge benefit to those that are looking at this light blue bar here to see where everything's coming from, imports into the region, and then therefore a conversation starter for how you might be able to change that or affect that given your appetite or desire to do so. The contribution to growth, another area that shows you the your percentage point contribution over the last 5 years, ranked by value or ANZIC sector, depending on how you prefer, but your output options in the lower right. That location quotient showing the representation of each industry sector relative to the next, with the green under an LQ location quotient of 1 showing underrepresentation or overrepresentation sitting above that as well. And then a shift share analysis. This particular module is useful to identify in national, industrial, local shares, and then relative to that being either positive or negative, the net change showed by this this little grey dot on the screen as well. You're able to export a transaction table as well. As I mentioned, there's a lot of interpretive text that explains what each of these modules or each of these blocks of information represent. And once again, if you have access to multiple local government areas within your account, you're able to view that and select that for all of these modules. You're able to select that at the start screen as you navigate through. Reports are relatively self-explanatory, so I might just leave those ones. And I think that's the majority of content that we had to cover for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that gives you a little bit more information about the platform itself and what's included. There is another session that'll be run on the 5th of April, but we'll send out more information through our LinkedIn. As I mentioned, our resource centre is a good space for finding out more information about the platform, where we upload data regularly. We also produce a monthly newsletter as well. So if you want more information, please subscribe to that over on the DataAU's website, dataau.com.au. We also post regular content on our LinkedIn page as well. So if you search for LinkedIn or for DataAU on LinkedIn, you'll be able to find a bit more information about that as well. But with all of that said, if there's no other questions, I don't really see any hands up. So I will say thank you very much for your time and for tuning in today. I hope that provided some more information about how to influence your carbon journey. Obviously, it's a pretty complex path, but there's definitely